Well, seeing as how it is 6 o'clock, according to the clock in front of me, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. It's nice to see people, people here besides just the folks at the desks. So let's see. I guess the next item on the agenda is the roll call. Sammy.
Great. We have Mayor Bell is absent, John Fox and John Lehman are absent. Kathy Engelbretson, Alan Wells, and Claire Smith are present, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. And are there any, as far as the agenda, any changes to the agenda?
There's not. Council has their packets in front of them. Everything is in order, and Adam will go through the later part of the agenda if there's any questions.
Thank you. And then was there any citizen testimony for tonight?
We did not receive any citizen testimony.
Okay, very good. So let's just move right on ahead here. On the consent agenda, we have the minutes from the April 9th meeting. And Sammy, remind me, in this case, since I'm filling in for the mayor, I'm not supposed to vote. Is that correct?
You are a voting member.
I'm a voting member
Correct.
still. Okay. Thank you. Did the counselors have any questions or anything to discuss on the minutes? Okay. I will entertain a motion then whenever you're ready.
Move to approve the minutes of April 9th, 2024.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Counselor Wells, for the motion, and second by Counselor Smith. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. And any opposed? Okay, so that motion carries 3-0. Thank you. That was easy. All right, and then the next exciting thing on the agenda is we have a special guest tonight, the Coburg Community Foundation. So we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. And we're here tonight to celebrate. Oh, that's okay. I need to get you on the mic, Leah. Right over here. So I could use my teacher voice.
The room can hear you, but the recording might not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do teach over Zoom. We're here tonight to celebrate a couple really special community members. And they are the recipients of the Coburg Community Foundation Scholarship for 2024. But just a little background, this is the third year that we've been able to offer the scholarship program, and the first year that we've been able to publicly recognize the recipients in this way. So we're excited to start a new tradition in that way. Our scholarship recipients all demonstrate a deep understanding of the meaning of community, and they each perform 8 hours of community service with a local organization. Over the last 3 years, our recipients have given their time to the Coburg Fire District, the Coburg Commons, the Coburg Food Pantry, you're getting the theme here, and other community organizations. It is the hope of the Coburg Community Foundation to grow our scholarship fund in the coming years and to be able to continue to support lifelong learning for our community members. I would like at this point to recognize the 2024 program recipients, Isabella Schmidt, who will be, yes, studying welding at LCC this fall. We're very excited to support a student pursuing the trades. And then also Jordan McKibben, who will be attending OSU in the fall to study business. And Jordan McKibben is doing business this evening and cannot be with us, but we will award her in person as well. So I just want to close real quick with a quote from one of this year's scholarship recipients that I feel like really celebrates the spirit of this scholarship. It said, "It would be my community helping to support me through the goals and helping me to achieve the future I've always dreamed of. Coburg is my home, and I am so blessed to have people surrounding me who I know that no matter what, I can always come home to."
That's great.
That's what we want. We want to send them out support them and let them know they can always come home, right? So I'd like to present this award certificate to Isabella tonight, and we have a little. Oh, yeah. tell them. Thank you. Yes. Oh. Okay.
You don't want me in the background. I'll scoot out of the background.
Yeah. Well, I'll hold Jordan.
We also have some.
Thank you. Yes, great.
Our
It's an
pleasure.
honor and yeah, just go forth and we wish you all the success in the future and
You'll
Yep.
have that.
and when we finally get to build our community center, we're gonna call on
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. And congratulations to the recipients.
Thank you. Nice meeting you too.
But he wants to paint happy little trees. Thank you.
See you. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, Coburg Community Foundation. That was very nice. Okay, and so then the next item on the agenda is actually a note about the March 12th, 2024 City Council minutes. Is that one that we need to approve again, Sammy?
Yes,
No, just
we did
notification.
not bring that to you guys because you guys had made, you hadn't. The last meeting, you had the option to rescind the motion and we went through that. So we wanted to leave these separate. So we knew what the direction of council was. The minutes reflect all of the changes as a rescinded vote and don't change any of the action items, the results of the action items.
Okay, and so it's more of a informational for us, or do we need to actually vote on it?
No, we do need a vote.
do
This
need to
is,
vote, okay.
yeah, because we hadn't, it was just an order of operations thing and we needed to have the official rescinding vote. And then Sammy could go back and correct the record and remove the person who, who voted but wasn't technically, unfortunately, a voting member. But the remainder of the minutes and as Sammy said, the actual decisions did not change. If we had a 3-2 vote or something that could have been super dicey, but we did not have any of those. So the removal of that one vote did not change any of the council decisions. And so that's why we didn't approve them last meeting. We had to make those corrections. And then we also wanted it not in the consent agenda. So we're specifically highlighting and adopting them as amended with this kind of unique circumstance.
Okay, thank you. So counselors, whenever you're ready, if you are, I'll entertain a motion to approve the amended March 12th city council minutes.
I move to approve the March 12th City Council minutes as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that's 3 in favor, 0 opposed, so the minutes are passed. Thank you. And we can then move right ahead into our administrative information. I believe Adam is going to take that away.
Sure, I'll walk through it. The first one is the police department quarterly reports. A quarter passes fast and Chief Larson's here to go over any of the content if you're interested in hearing any details or recaps on the statistics. We've added, we're trying to maintain and keep some graphic table displays so we can show some trending as well. Quarter to quarter.
makes sense to us internally, but if you don't have prior quarters to compare it to, it's hard when you're not in the day-to-day of it. So there is some comparison and charts that help kind of look at kind of seasonality of some. And as I think Chief Larson said before, some of it, there is not seasonality to it. There's just randomness of the activities and events that occur in and around the community. Maybe while you're giving it a quick review, I can add just a status update and the chief can add on. But we're, I think we're just over the halfway mark of our officer at the academy. So we're really looking forward to having Officer Smith complete that. It's an extensive training process and timeline, and we'd love to get him back and get him going and assimilated with the rest of the team and out on patrol. So that's making good progress.
Yeah, that's great news. Any questions or comments from counselors?
I had one question on the business checks. Is that just routine business checks, or is there a part of that where there's a problem at the business and they're calling for a routine? Okay, thank you.
I'm glad to see things have settled down a little bit since the September quarter. At least on the charts, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, and that's also where some of the data can be deceiving. The last 2 weeks on I-5 and some of the things that aren't, some were in town and some were associated with, but officers have been very busy on 2 very high publicity and high impact regional events. So it's where sometimes the data tells part of the story, and the intensity of some of the stats really are hard to put out there for you all. But I think everybody saw and read about those 2 recent events, and hopefully again, as you mentioned, hopefully things calm down from that as well. We don't have that be a pattern.
Yeah, this proximity to, I-5 and having the interchange is obviously a big factor in the recent incidents,
And I
or
would,
the factor.
I would point out to you that it's great mutual aid and regional collaboration on that, both directions. Our police force does a great job of, augmenting the things that happen that are outside, but close by, outside our jurisdiction, and then vice versa. Good collaboration between the various agencies. It's really a must, and it works really well. And I think Chief Larson and the team do a great job of ensuring those relationships in some of the non-event times is where you build, on those relationships with mutual training and all of that, and participating in regional task forces and those kind of things. So I think that's a really good thing for us.
Well, I know I certainly appreciate our public safety staff and everything they do, and it must be very stressful at times, obviously. That kind of goes without saying, but recent events have been rather stressful in that way. So we appreciate you and what you do. Thank you. Okay, well, I think it sounds like we're ready to move on to the next item there, Coburg Main Streets.
Yeah, this is one that we've talked about a long time. It's been kind of lurking on my whiteboard list for quite a while, and I've had a chance to meet with Megan a number of times about it. Megan Dompe, the Coburg Main Street Executive Director. So what is in front of you here in the packet is a short summary council staff report that gives a little background. But the main thing really is to get an initial take from you all on the structure of the agreement for services. So it's the draft contract that is right behind the staff report. the idea is to take revisions either now or between now and the next meeting, or suggestions or concerns, and make sure that we have a really viable working draft agreement for the June meeting, where the goal would be to adopt an actual agreement, and the effective date would be July 1 for the fiscal year. So the concept here is really an agreement for services using primarily lodging tax funds that are restricted in how they're allowed to be used. And the reporting that's called out in here is really the couple things. It gives Main Street the chance to report back their successes and their utilization of city funds, but it also is some regulatory compliance to make sure that the information they bring back allows us to be assured that we are meeting the ORS requirements that come with lodging tax revenues. So that's part of it. So this comes with some fairly basic reporting requirements, annual reporting. The consideration is also in somewhat large chunks. The allocation that we came up with of the 30,000, which is a little bit less than what the direct cost of the prior year staff person with the city, and then the payments that we made kind of in agreement from last year's budget to continue that to Main Street for this fiscal year. This is a little bit less than that prior amounts. 20,000 of it's 30,000 in total annually. 20,000 is kind of a lump sum intended to provide funding for tourism services, 10,000 for community engagement. And then we define those a little bit more under the services provided. The tourism services, is a lot to do with event tourism promotion, drawing visitors to Coburg, which they've already proven very adept at doing. There's some reporting that we'll need to do to make sure that really meets the definitions of tourists and all of that. I don't foresee any issues there. And really the minimum mandatories I think are not can be hard for them to easily exceed. But what we're really paying for services at a minimum is 4 seasonal community events, full-on seasonal events. Throughout the goal being somewhat throughout the year. It's not, we on purpose put seasonal by winter, spring, summer, fall to not, over dictate kind of the timing. If they end up having 2 great ones that are kind of close by, that's not the end of the world. But the broad objective is really just to have year-round activity and year-round tourism to help support all of the ripple of business services that connect with the tourism industry. And the 10,000 is for community engagement and communication. And again, that's broad on purpose. The primary driving factor within that is the newsletter that the city used to produce, and having that kind of go over to them. That gives them a lot more flexibility than the city has to look at sponsorship, advertising, different ways to help them monetize and not be overly dependent on the city's money. It's really intended to not be seed funding that goes away necessarily. I think there's always a partnership there that for the tourism side, and that the funding that we have is literally designed as pass-through funding to an entity that does tourism, but it's also to help them look at opportunities to expand funding in other areas. And the newsletter, is likely one component that they can do differently than we can. And I think from a kind of a rather than a direct mailing, opening the door to that being electronic, email, listserv, social media, links and all of that, a number of ways to access the content electronically, and some print at key places, a stack here at City Hall, some at key community places. So but it's not intended or required in here to be direct mailed, which has high cost and debatable about whether the readership would be necessarily automatically better anyway. And it allows a lot more, it's a lot more economical to get get content out. And again, if these in future years, this is designed to be an annual contract, because the dollars that we get for lodging revenues do fluctuate. They typically, creep up, but things can happen that reduce those. And it gives an opportunity for us each year, both sides, both Main Street and the city, to look at, okay, did those services, how well did that work last year? Are there new projects, new things that Main Street is looking to venture into that they're interested in having city funds or sharing cost share for? So we can add, and amend this agreement each year. But this is really the hope is that this is kind of the structural underpinnings of it, and then we adjust into the future based on this standard foundation here. One of the, besides the number 3, the services provided. Well, I didn't finish on services provided. So tourism marketing campaigns, branding on the tourism side, not city, but really tourism branding and promoting tourism, then the seasonal events, and then the quarterly newsletter at a minimum. And one thing to add on to that is part of that, it will be a slot available or a chunk available for the city to do directly that's not necessarily tourism related. It's city news. City news and events could be upcoming agendas. It could be, notices of public hearings, open houses, that are city stuff. So it does provide us a channel through that communication medium as well. And then the final one under services provided is operating and managing the informational kiosk at Pavilion. I think I've heard little bits about how it's functioned in the past, and I think it's done a lot of different things. It's kind of ebbed and flowed. And I think the idea really is to, this has it's a commitment to operate and manage it, but with kind of a plan about how that works to be done more administratively between Megan and myself. And obviously we would share that with council, and it can be something that, if council wants to, approve it or have a decision-making piece in that's very easy to have happen. But the idea really is to kind of remove city staff from that and have it more match their community events, different upcoming things. And Megan has some great ideas for kind of some things that aren't event and tourism specific, but more cultural. There's some indigenous Native American ideas of the Kalapuya, the different really, I think, interesting things that would enliven that space at the front of Pavilion Park. And it makes some clarity, because we're kind of, do you do it? Do we do it? We kind of point fingers, who's going to do it? We want to do something next week. Is staff available? I think that, it'll provide some clarity about who's responsible for what. And then moving on to number 4, the use of facilities. That's another big one about who's responsible for what, how does it function, which is generating this is again, the commitment for kind of turning over the operational responsibilities and benefits of the IOF building to Main Street, rather than it being a city direct managed facility. The city would maintain the lease and kind of the similar insurance that we have on it now. We would develop a sublease that both the Main Street Board and council and our insurance, CIS insurance, and the IOF board, all entities have a chance to chime in and get comfortable with. So Main Street then kind of runs that facility. We'd have to carve out, and we've already talked about this, carving out what the senior meals program that happens there, and just some of the logistics that we have not worked on. So I don't foresee, that one could change annually as well. That one likely wouldn't change as frequently, maybe as this document does, but it will be able to. We'll probably have a renewal. At a minimum, the renewal will match our 5-year agreement that we're 1 year in. So it'll probably be a 4-year sublease with some ability to make amendments. But that actual document isn't here. This contract is a commitment for the city to maintain the current lease and pay that, and have Main Street operate it. I think it opens up that building to the community at a broader scale and ability that city staff have to do that. Kind of an event space. Cities sometimes run event spaces. Oftentimes they may own the building and, you know, have an operator under a license or under a contract. That's more common. We're good at a lot of things. There's some things we're best not to be operating. I think that's event spaces and those kind of things are ones that I think Main Street would do a far better job of. And again, have some revenue potential for Main Street. The goal is really, I think, partially to provide some diversification of revenue for Main Street to, you know, to have them sustain themselves financially and be viable and grow and be vibrant over time. And again, I think naturally not be necessarily as dependent on the city's tourism funds as a ratio of their overall budget. I don't, you know, I still think there's value there that I don't think we would whittle it down because we have a commitment to do tourism related work with those funds anyway. So it's a natural partnership there. Number 5 is required reporting, and then the general provisions are pretty standard, you know, quasi boilerplate contract terms. And that is the basic structure of the agreement, and the recitals in the front talk about some of the ORSs that really drive some of the work. It's not 100% of the 30,000. Not 100% of that is tourism funds. Well, it is 100% tourism generated funds. Not all of it is restricted in the ORS. Portion of it is, and a portion of it is not. So that is, I think, the last piece is this same draft contract. It may not have included the kiosk piece. I'm not sure. Went to the Main Street Board. There could maybe Councillor Smith could maybe correct me if the kiosk was in there or not. I'm not sure if it made it for when you had it. I think we knew it was a leftover item.
I knew we were kind of looking at
Yeah.
it, but no decision
Okay,
was made. on
okay.
it.
Yeah, and so they looked at the contract generally, and I think this gives the opportunity for Main Street Board to do the same thing as council, mull it over, make sure we understand it, make sure we're fine with all the provisions, bring any amendments back to the June meeting, execute that one and cross it off our whiteboard and let them get rolling, which they're already rolling.
We're kind of holding her back, actually.
Couple questions. What do we pay the IOF for rent at the? I mean, we're paying the IOF rent to use that building, right?
Right, it's $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year.
Dollars a month.
Yeah.
And when we're giving use of that building for free to Main Street, right? Not that that's not a good idea, but they're going to then in turn sublease that on our behalf to other parties. And for example, an event takes place there, we collect $1,000. I know that's crazy, but $1,000 from that $1,000 goes to the city, or does it go to the Main Street people?
That would go to Main Street. So what in the agreement, you know, and again, that is, well, we don't manage it. We don't have all of the staff involvement in managing it and checking it to be, you know, did the event come out right? Is it clean? We don't have to pay the insurance for, you know, all of
get
that
that.
kind of stuff. So there's trade-offs, but yeah, that's kind of conceptually the plan. Is they also are looking at having having some sort of a storefront for the organization to be visible as kind of an economic development, tourism, visitor center kind of a place to have Coburg related, you know, materials available. That's hard to do in a multi-use space. So I think that's still under discussion on their part. But the idea, to me, the 12,000 investment that the city is making ensures that it is able to be used by the public. Without that, I'm not certain that there's another entity would be able to coordinate what's needed with the IOF board and keep it open and keep it available. So part of our skin in the game is to keeping that available to the community. You're right. We are not getting our money back. We are fully subsidizing it. Right now we pay the utilities. That's probably something that we'll be talking about, to say that that's an expense, kind of the operating expense side, would also belong to Main Street. Not massive, but not nothing either. And I think then we jointly look at, enhancements to the building, in coordination with IOF. And really, then I think there's some on the 2 and 3 years out kind of range, maybe not even that, talking about what to do when the 5-year, lease is up. Because I think, to me, that was a smart decision made to have the city backstop the lease to allow it to stay open and available. Because I've seen it in other communities where it doesn't, and you can't claw it back sometimes. Sometimes you can. I've seen it come back, but that's my kind of my spiel or take on that. But you're absolutely right that there's a budgetary impact to the city, and the potential revenues would not come back to the city. They offset, or I would imagine mostly offset, operating costs to use the facility, and they might actually have a little bit of excess in addition to the offsets, but it hasn't, I don't think it gets, it's a fairly straightforward space to rent. It's not a high dollar rental, but it could be more as we move forward, and those are in future years. We could always look at amending those agreements as well, because those, those could be adjusted.
Have the terms of this agreement been discussed at a different meeting? I don't recall.
No, this is the time. Yeah, we're going to come back with for a full council for an actual decision. Oh, yes,
Well,
right.
I get
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
we want to.
Yeah, no,
But
thanks. Thanks.
we're not only paying Main Street, $40,000 a year.
30.
$30,000 a year, but then we're allowing Main Street to use what could be a revenue generating entity to the city for free. And yet we're not getting anything from them when they rent it out. I mean, it would seem like if they do collect $1,000 a month, that would offset, part of that quarterly payment that we make to them. I mean, we're getting dinged twice, you know what I mean?
That's an absolutely valid council deliberation, whether you are looking to recapture revenue from them for the use of that space the contract can reflect that. We brought it forward as not having those embedded in the agreement. Again, my take is depends on what the goal is, right? If the goal is to really kind of partner and backstop Coburg Main Street, not as a what do they get versus what do we get, but what does it bring to the community? What does it bring to our tourism sector? What does it bring to the businesses that that are benefited by tourism? Is it worth it? And that's really the council deliberation of what amount is worth it. And the 30,000, as I said before, a portion of that, I still have to figure out exactly the historical ratio here of the ORS requirements. There's a formula for what portion of that is mandated to go for very specific tourism marketing services. But it has to be spent on that anyway. So if we don't have a partner do that work for us, we have to do that work. We can't, and we have to spend it. We can't hold it and save it. In another city prior, we were audited by the Lodging and Restaurant Association to see, and a lot of the cities on the coast, it's a battle always about, are you using it for the ORS or are you using it for things outside of that? This puts us very cleanly in the area where we're using it, consistent with ORS. But no, very, very valid question. And that's the deliberation with council about the extent of support. And part of that is foregoing some amount of revenue. I would say that the revenue this fiscal year is very marginal. It's a lot of work to maintain a building, keep it clean, check up on them after they're done. I would expect that it would be very minimal net revenue.
Well,
But-
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
dominate the time here,
Okay.
but first of all, we're gonna have another opportunity to see
Yep.
this, right? When we have all of the council here, which would be good. But
Hopefully everybody's here next
the-
month. Yeah.
The lease that we have with the IOF, I think if I'm not mistaken, it's a net lease, right? So we are responsible for maintaining the building. Anything that happens to the building, it's on us, right? So we're, not only are we losing the opportunity to make any money by renting out the building for events, which by the way, compete with private people out there building event centers to do that same kind of thing. That's not really important here, but that's a consideration. But
Mhm.
then we have to maintain the building in addition to that. So we're taking away a source of revenue completely by allowing, and I love Main Street. They do a great job, and Megan is terrific. Heck, we've hired her over at the greenhouse because she does such a good
Yep.
job. She's perfect for it, but I'm just thinking that there might be some sort of revenue sharing arrangement that we could come up with, because at the very least, if they're gonna be using the building all the time for these events, should they not then be responsible for maintaining the building?
Yeah. Oh, yes, that'll be part of the, an agreement is, like I say, the utilities and, maintenance, the general maintenance. So there'll be a line at which the major stuff would be the city. The very major stuff right now is not the city anyway. It's IOF. So
Definitely.
we're not responsible for roof,
Roof and-
and extra, we're responsible for kind of the interior wear and tear type maintenance. So we only have a portion. IOF is still the umbrella responsibility of the building, the property. We have a layer, and then what we'd establish is the layer of Main Street underneath that. So it would relieve us from some. We haven't come up with the total definition of where that line is, but it would relieve us from some of that and the day-to-day management and taking of deposits and negotiating and, and all of the, promoting is the event, is it available, calendaring, scheduling, all of that effort
Still,
would be theirs.
there's a sublease agreement that we're not
Correct.
seeing yet.
Right, and that's what
might
this is
sell
calling
out.
out. This is calling out that what we're doing is making a commitment. So it says the city will at no cost to Main Street execute a separate sublease agreement to manage and operate for both Main Street and community activities within the scope and approval of the IOF Board of Directors as well. So we're not the only ones that have a say in how that goes. And the sublease will detail insurance liability coverage requirements, types of uses and activities allowed, process for improvements and alterations to the facility, which we've already run into, not snags, just communication issues about doing it right in an assembly occupancy building. ADA, it's not a residential facility, it's a commercial facility, and historic. Responsibilities for utility service, security, and other operational details. So really what this master agreement is a commitment that we work that part out and bring that forward.
Yeah.
But again, your point about the revenue share, all of that is, that's something that council could implement.
And I want to let Counselor Smith.
Yeah, I'm on the board with Main Streets, and just for information, the hope and the goal with Main Streets taking over the rental. Some of the things Megan has already done is she has gone out and researched what other facilities are rented for. She's already reached out to someone to clean it. That would come out of the price of, we'll bump the rentals up to cover the cost of
Mhm.
cleaning and securing it when someone is done. And then the other piece that is, and I know budget is an issue, but the other piece is we were able to keep a historic building
Oh, yeah.
in the city.
Agreed.
And it hasn't been rented as much as it used to be because it's needing some work. There's also some goals for updating the kitchen to make it more usable, redoing, decorating the space, but cleaning it up and with keeping in mind a restoration versus a remodel. I mean, it's not a fancy building, but and the hope, I know Megan texted me a little while ago and said that she spent the whole day with Tourism Oregon and that they have had some great input. So I think the goal is if we can hold on to the building for a little bit. The dream would be that someday Main Streets would become solvent enough to be able to keep that building if they choose to sell it or. I mean, that's a long ways down the road. And I get the piece with the revenue sharing. And we've also talked about, you know, when tourism and things like that are up because of events that happen there and the other things that Main Street does, is the hope is that there will be a give back to the, not necessarily maybe the city, but
Right.
to the community in some way to help, you know, with other projects or whatever that might come up. But
You know, just to add on to that, I think there's definitely, like I say, in the 4-year window that the lease that the city has, you know, that's the window to talk about some of those future things. What is the long-term plan? Because my staff opinion is that the long-term plan probably doesn't make sense for the city to have have this multi-tiered lease, you know, arrangement. I think again, it was the intention is to preserve it as a community asset. I would assume, you know, if we wanted, we could ensure that, you know, X number of events are done at no cost, that they're free events, they're community events, that they don't have a fee or they don't, you know, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. You know, looking at it from a more of a classic business perspective, you know, is one way to go. The other way to look at it is what is the community investment that because really the lodging funds are inherently ours temporarily, right? It's revenue to the city that is intended by law to go back and kind of feed that beast, right? And grow that industry. So, you know, the success that we hopefully collectively have may mean that, you know, that the 12,000 a year goes away after even maybe before the 4th year, before the end, and they take over all of that, and we exit that early before the 5 years, or you know, they're able to squirrel enough away to get a system in place to where, as Councilor Smith said, that maybe Main Street can take it over and own it, or there's a different arrangement where we're joint partner owners, or you know, a lot of different things to think about into the future. But this gets the structure started, and you know, it could also be that if it makes great revenue, that maybe that is something that is discounted off of what we pay. Instead of paying 30,000, we look at the prior year's differential in you know, P&L for the building operationally, and if it makes 10, we say, well, then we're going to give you 25 instead of 30 next year. So it's kind of a retroactively adjusting for revenue that they've made on that, and that offsets our lease. So a lot of different ways we could go about it. But this is great. And this is exactly the point of bringing it here kind of in a working format, not in a deliberation to a decision, because we can bring additional language to the table, or at least if we need additional language to this master agreement, that could happen too. Or what we've done at least now and can do next month is give Megan and I a lot more input on what the sublease should look like, you know, how it should be structured. Probably primarily the debatable part is this financial part. The rest of that sublease is pretty straightforward about whose responsibility is whose.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think that one of the challenges with any kind of, I kind of see this as a marketing overall, you know, big picture, this is a marketing endeavor. And one of the challenges of that is always, you can't, you know, it's hard to measure what return you're getting on your investment when you do this kind of activity, marketing and the costs that go along with it. But thank you for the discussion and the questions. I think that's a good discussion. So if counselors have thoughts in the meantime before the next meeting, I'm assuming you would like us to email you.
That'd be great.
Regarding
Yeah.
this, with thoughts, comments, so that as we head into the June meeting, we're not starting from a blank slate, but we have some.
Right.
Yeah, don't take that as challenging.
Oh, no.
I mean, it's just good discussion, because I thought, gosh, if I missed something, because that's the first time I'd seen that. And it's like, oh.
Yeah, no, I love the conversation. That's exactly what we wanted to bring forward, is so we can chew on it and figure out what makes it work right for everybody, and oftentimes there, yeah, micro compromises, make it all work, right? So,
I don't think anything's off the table.
No.
yep, yep. Yeah. There's great potential regardless of how we shape the final project or product. I mean, it's already bearing fruit, and then this just kind of solidifies a lot of that. And it really is, as Sammy mentioned, it's a multi-year thing, moving it from having a city staff function, doing some economic development, dipping their toe into some of the stuff that's kind of outside the normal city functions. And the beauty of being able to have an actual now established nonprofit, because that was an obstacle prior, is they weren't an established nonprofit. Now they are. We have some agreement limitations about who, how we do money and all of that. And this is all kind of marching down a path that's kind of been, somewhat of a planned narrowing down to a document here, and then letting them run wild.
Well, and the 4 main events that they will host are not meant to be revenue generating.
Right.
They're meant to be fun community events like Christmas in Coburg, Music in the Park, the Halloween run. Yeah, the Antique Fair is not considered one of the community events that Main Streets will host. We're partnered with it and help with it. But the main events each year are meant to be to help promote people coming into town, tourism, and they're not looked at as revenue generating. Basically, most of the revenue generating at this point is coming from sponsorships, which have been pretty decent.
Golden years. Any chance of bringing that back as one of the 4?
We haven't looked at it as actually as golden years, but a late fall type of festival that may have some similar things, but looking for, and the seasons were perfect. And, we've already got 2 of them well covered.
Right.
And then looking at something for spring and then around golden years. So.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, because one thing I did forget is that community event versus non also helps us distinguish between the stuff from the staff side, what staff support and staff involvement is. So the community events we're partners in. So city will be doing a lot of some of the behind the scenes logistics that they've done historically. Those will be distinctly different and not the same sort of retail fees for something like the Antique Fair or others that are not one of the 4. The city has a fee schedule. We have billable hours for our various staff. Main Street can choose to use us for those things to fulfill the permit requirements, or they can go, if they can find it cheaper somewhere else, great. They go to another vendor for certain things to fulfill that need. But it really helps us distinguish what stuff we're kind of more fully engaged in as a civic partner, and what stuff is a revenue generating and separate event. So it may or may not be noticeable to the person attending the events. Doesn't have to be noticeable, but for us, we'll have a real clean understanding about what stuff do we do kind of pro bono, no fee on the community events, that on non-community events we would be charging for. So we're not kind of the boots on the ground for all of those. We do want to be the boots on the ground to help support those bigger full community events that are about tourism, but they're also about community livability and all of that stuff. It's kind of bigger than the more targeted stuff. So thanks for
And
reminding me
on
about that.
that vein, if it is an event like the Antique Fair and we need police services and public works, then part of what comes in for the Antique Fair is used to offset some of the financial cost to the city. And the other thing that they're really mindful of is to very clearly, so that our citizens know the difference between a City of Coburg event and a community Main Streets event, so that people aren't, you don't get 15 phone calls at City Hall for,
Right.
Why wasn't there any parking for Christmas in Coburg? And why didn't the city, if they're going to host it, why aren't they going to do something about it? It's like we're trying to separate that so the city doesn't get a bad rap for things that they aren't a part of, and it doesn't take up their time.
That we're the regulators for, not the partners and participants in. I think it'll work itself out, and that was something that has been talked about for quite a while, is how to more cleanly delineate those, so we all know, so we don't have guesses too at the last minute. I thought I could get the city to do that, like, and clarity. A lot of this is for clarity. So
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point, about making sure that it can be confusing, especially the way Coburg has done things in the past. It can be confusing. Is this a city-run event or is this, so I appreciate that.
A lot of people
you know.
still think the Antique Fair is a city-run event.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, we still control
It's
some,
supported.
and we have control over ensuring the logistics of parking and traffic control and closure of streets and all that stuff, regardless of community event or non, there are rules. We may, on community events, we may be a Saturday morning participant in moving barricades and doing things. And on non-events, they may be hiring that done or doing that differently, or paying us more retail rates to be a participant and take care of that.
Well, and I was happy to see about the newsletter. I just want to mention that because a lot of people have mentioned to me that they were kind of disappointed that
Mhm.
the newsletter has kind of disappeared. And so I think that would be something that people would enjoy in some form, like what has been proposed here.
And we're
So,
starting out quarterly, and then that's another thing that Main Streets is looking at. If it's a fairly simple process online and time allows and there's a need, maybe we publish it more frequently. But it's kind of like we're dipping our toe into all of these things to see how they work. We'll kind of make changes as we go.
I think those changes will reflect every year in the annual report, and requests or suggestions, both sides, from city side and from Main Street, about adjustments. I think this is going to help a lot in how we kind of do. We have great relationship with Main Street, but I think this adds a ton of clarity. Also, once we get all the details worked out, it helps in both sides of our budgeting. So we have clarity financially as well as operationally and responsibility.
okay, well, thank you for the discussion, counselors, and Adam. And then again, if you think of more things, questions, comments, direction, feel free to please email Adam as he's preparing for next month. Thank
Great.
you. Okay, thank you, Adam.
Yes.
The recreational immunity.
Yeah. So
ordinance.
this one sort of popped out on almost everybody in the state as when I called around. The topic of, I've mentioned it multiple times in prior months, that the Oregon Supreme Court case, the city of Newport, thought they had kind of a slam dunk recreational immunity claim. It made its way through appeals, and lo and behold, Oregon Supreme Court said, no, that isn't recreational immunity. So it created this big hole, this big gap, that for all cities in Oregon, that no longer recreational immunity kind of temporarily did not exist and didn't cover the city and private property owners who opened up their lands for the public. So what happened in the short session of the legislature, January, February, was they shored that up. And that was a big push. The League of Oregon Cities was kind of their primary thing. That kind of thing usually doesn't happen in a short session. It's a little bigger than what normally happens in a short session, but that was fixed up. And so all of us felt like, okay, great. We now have walking, biking, and hiking, those words added to an ORS section that related to recreational immunity. Then about a month later, what started surfacing was a couple of city attorneys are saying, well, you need to do this either resolution or ordinance to opt in, to close the gap completely. And I think from League of Oregon Cities was a little surprised by it. Our insurance company, CIS, was surprised by it as well. And it made the rounds on the city manager listservs email about, hey, what are you guys doing? Do you feel this is needed? So as I understand it, the extra step of actually being required to pass an ordinance, which is the strongest of the two, resolution versus ordinance, and ordinance is a higher legal document and legal order, is because there was a provision outside of the standard recreational immunity provisions in the ORS that came after that was done in its history. I can't remember when recreational immunity came in, but there was one a decade, 15 years later in a different section of ORS completely that applied to trails. And that section had an opt-in that said, other than any city over 500,000, cities over 500,000 didn't need to opt in. Everyone else did, which of course at the time was Portland and the rest of us. So everybody but Portland had to opt in for that trails part of recreational immunity to be in effect. And so what this does, it doesn't bring in the stuff that was changed in the short session. That stuff automatically applies. We've been covered, restored, or closed that gap ever since the short session completed. But what this ordinance does is closes that loophole of trails. And since we have a section of our park system that is unpaved trail, the Booth Trail, we determined that it needed to be brought forward for council to consider adopting it to close that last little bit of recreational immunity gap or liability that we might, or exposure that we might have. So that's what this ordinance is. It's put together by the legal staff at LCOG. Other cities, a few other cities have already done it. Many are kind of in the same stage we are, going, oh geez, let's throw it on agenda. Didn't realize we even needed to do this. City of Bend did theirs. And again, some are doing resolutions, which are legally acceptable. They're not as legally strong as an ordinance. So what I thought tonight was just to give this exact overview of this kind of niche thing that we should, staff recommendations, we should do this. It again mitigates a little bit of our exposure that we have. I think it's not a large exposure. The big exposure was taken care of by the legislature. So this will be on the June agenda, and a couple of reasons it didn't. We were short on time to put all the materials together to get it ready to actually have it be a public hearing here. And I thought it was kind of oddball, so it was worth a conversation first and exposure. I think the exposure that we currently have is very limited, so I didn't feel it needed to be rushed through no matter what. If we had large exposure sitting out there, we would have rushed something through. The question I had, that just for general direction, is we can kind of do the ordinance the normal way, which is first reading, second reading. One of them includes a public hearing, and then it's effective 30 days after, or we can shrink it as much as our charter allows and get it done in effective on the second meeting. It'd be effective then in July meeting rather than 30 days after. So the question really in direction was, I think staff, we talked about it as staff, and we don't want to use the emergency clause unless there's an emergency. However, this does meet the emergency clause. It was written by the LCOG attorneys as an emergency clause. Most cities are putting it through their version of an emergency clause process. Ours, every charter has a different emergency clause to it. I think it's very viable and defendable and makes sense to put it through as an emergency clause, but we wanted to make sure that there was at least some direction from council, because we don't want to set a precedent for any time we can, try and call something emergency just for ease and efficiency. We do it. We don't want it to be that way. So if there's general agreement, we still have to notice it. We still have to have a public hearing. It doesn't, it's not regulatory in terms of it imposing something on anyone in the community. It merely limits our liability on that trail and probably the unimproved part of Trails End Trail. Those are our two areas of exposure. So, and if there's any kind of initial either questions or thoughts about emergency or non-emergency, it doesn't change things gigantically. We can do it either way. I think it meets it. I would recommend it, but it's not the end of the world if there's a concern about public perception or not giving enough adequate public ability to chime in.
Oh, I
Councilor
think
Wells?
it qualifies as an emergency because it exposes us to liability. So yeah, do it.
Yeah, I agree too.
I'd rather do it as an emergency than be sitting here and saying, if we had done it sooner, we wouldn't be faced with a lawsuit. So
Yeah, I think it's, you know, yeah, I think it's unlikely, but it does, that exposure is there, what you just described. So we will put it forward in June with that path. And we'll recap kind of that. And I've grabbed some stuff from other cities that might do a better job of explaining it than I did, so.
Thank you, Adam. And so the city administration report.
Yeah, this ended up being a number of updates to ones that were prior. So if you look through there, like the Department of Energy grant update, I left the body of the original there, and just on the very top added the update part. So the very top of the title is the update, and the update is that we submitted at the on the 10th, last Friday, the very last day, got it all pulled together and submitted. The change was it was required to be scaled back slightly. So the size of the system isn't guaranteed to generate all of the energy, annualized energy consumption at the plant. That's a EPUD electric utility limitation, 199 kilowatt. Under 200 is common for any electric utility that's a BPA customer. If you buy your power from Bonneville Power Administration, which I was very familiar with from Ashland, the contract limits renewable energy to 200 under 200 kilowatt systems, unless you go through this really crazy multi-year process to get approved. So that's what we're under for this, which isn't substantial. The original, the 100% coverage of electricity annualized was a 231 kilowatt system. So we're just under. I just wanted to make sure that was just a note. It's slightly smaller system because of the utility requirement contractually. So we will find out sometime in August. We think it's a pretty compelling grant application. It has the potential for, operating costs of $40,000 a year, aside from the kind of the environmental, benefit that solar brings. And it's designed as as you see from the picture, pole mount. So we lose very little utilization of the ground under it. And it's also been designed, if can't really see very well in this picture, you sort of can. So there's the building at the bottom left. If you go north, there's two cars. You go kind of diagonally to the right, those 6 dark dots, that area, this is, I left the last month's picture on it. It's now configured to shade that area, all the water in that area, which actually has some operational benefits to the plant to provide pretty constant, full year shade to that basin, and that helps us with our effluent temperature that we dump out to the creek. So it has that little operational benefit as well. So that's out the door, and we'll find out in August whether we get it. I ended up being gone on the day it was due. So Brian and Megan stepped in beautifully and finished it off for me. So it was a total team effort to get that thing completed on a quick turnaround. The second one is an equipment surplus. Just wanted to report back. We did this, I think, in November or December. Council approved the bulk surplus vehicle, and I wanted to give you a recap. In the council meeting, the packet, then we estimated between 25 and 30,000 was going to be the revenue for that, and we hit right in the midpoint of our educated guess. So that it worked really well. GovDeals, once we got the hang of posting it, it's very similar to Craigslist and Marketplace, but it's dialed to public sector. Worked really well. It got the vehicles exposure, got quick responses. It's an auction bid thing, and that they have a certain number of days to come get it. It got them in and out of here. So we cleaned out all those and hit our revenue targets that we thought we'd hit. Third one is another grant update. let's see. Oh, I should have, yes, I maybe should have, not said grant update. This is, it is a grant update from the Business Oregon. The property, the annexed 107 acres that I think I announced last time had a, just over $2 million grant. I kept it on here because we participated in a video that is about a 2 or 3 minute one that highlights that grant and the job potential. And it really, the video is being used to, to garner additional funding to deal with the infrastructure requirements to make it a reality at that scale. So included in here is a link. We'll have it on the city website at some point. You can critique the Coburg City Administrator's role in that video wasn't too awesome, but it's a good video overall, and really puts Coburg in a good light. There's some really great drone photography. And it did reference that one person in that was interviewed said that, the awarded to the city of Coburg, it isn't awarded, in case anybody asks, it's awarded to the property owner with a whole lot of conditions about what it can be used for. It doesn't come through the city finances at all. It's direct, which is kind of even better. We'll have some more conversations about that for infrastructure needs to make that a reality. But that's for another time. Another grant update, the RARE grant. This is a great one. It's not, things aren't pending. We got it. This is one, again, that was Brian and Megan primarily. We just were notified yesterday that we did get the grant. That's about a $25,000 value of having a 9 to 10 month RARE person work with us exclusively to make progress and complete a lot of required action items on our TMDL permit, which is our total maximum daily load, basically our water quality permit requirements. And it's just a really challenging one in the cities I've worked at before to get to and to do, but it's a 5-year action plan. I think Brian comes around every August or September to report on the plan. We're due for a redo of the complete plan soon. So this will be completing a lot of work and helping us prepare our next 5-year plan. And RARE members are great assets. They are not your average intern. They're far beyond that. So we're really excited. And we are partnering with Muddy Creek Irrigation District to help them out. They couldn't have really pulled it off on their own. They don't have a huge TMDL regulatory requirement. So it's a really cool partnership because we utilize that system. And then we were asked if we could also share with the city of Tangent. I'm not sure what brought that city to us, but it's a very small part, and most of that work is on the educational materials, and it's almost plug and play with put their logo in instead of ours. We're sharing our output of product mainly. So really excited. That'll be August or September. We'll have that person here, and we'll bring him in and introduce and kind of outline what our action plan is for that. Next one is kind of a bummer news. Wastewater treatment plant, we had a theft at the outfall. So it's not at the plant, but it's at the far edge north of Trails End, where we have some instruments and equipment that monitors temperature and flow for meeting our regulatory requirements and our reporting to DEQ. It was clipped and stripped and taken. So police report was filed. PD did some great work on trying to, once we found out, we don't quite know how long it was within a day, because we otherwise we see data and we didn't see data, but we don't know how many hours that it was gone, but weren't able to track it down. But we did file an insurance claim, and so it's about a $12,000 replacement, and we have a $1,000 deductible. So we at least it was a covered item. But it's kind of an example. The only reason to bring it up is those are just those operational headaches and things that happen. And we've, at a lower level, we have some, kind of infrequent, but not infrequent enough, vandalism at our parks, and just things that are broken that otherwise don't need to be broken. And it just is part of our budgets to keep them going. That's just kind of the way it goes. But Brian's done a great job. We had to notify DEQ. We have a period of time before this new equipment arrives where we can't do our data collection. at least we're in an okay time of the year, but we're creeping on a time of year where it's a big deal. So Brian's done a great job of kind of doing a make do reporting to keep us in compliance, and DQ's been great too. So that took up a bunch more time that we didn't have planned for. Engineering services update on the RFP. We extended that to June. We just ran out of time to get it posted and be able to make it back for this meeting, seeing that we have not a full roster on council. It looks like for that reason too, it was a good idea. We're still fine because we have to put a notice, of intent to award, and then there's 7 days before you can award. So even if we could have squeezed it in, we were running into this 7-day notice of intent problem. So it's a big item for us, and we chose to give it maximum exposure out in the marketplace and make sure that we get good eyes on it and hopefully some great submittals. So we're putting together the team to review it, and we'll have it for you at the next council meeting in plenty of time in the packet and able to be evaluated. The rest of it is kind of our stats, our departmental stuff. And if there's anything that pops out at you, I can answer most of them, or we can take a note of it and you respond by email to council so everybody hears the responses if I don't have them immediately. I would add the last one is a piece that we've added that we hadn't had in this regularly. And it's because it's a lot of the workload things at the front office are not super quantifiable. Doesn't the data, the metrics don't always make sense or easy to explain. Sammy put together some great stats on our community outreach through social media, both on the city page and the police page, and she manages the team that posts some really great stuff. And I think I said it when I first got here that our social media efforts are better than many cities that are much larger. It's really good, and we'll keep at it and keeping it going. But these are some good numbers, so there's some good data there to look at.
Any questions, comments, counselors?
You can always hit me up too after you take them home and read them. We're actually going to also try and post. We're going to post the city administration report as its own social media item. So it's not the same as a newsletter, but it does have a lot of, sometimes wonky, but a lot of city content that some people I think wouldn't otherwise dig through council packets to find. So we're going to post those as well.
Great. Well, I'm always impressed by how much our little staff can do here.
The link to the city administrator's report, would that be appropriate to take to Main Streets and ask if they would include that on our website as well? Or do you want to keep those separate?
Yeah, I don't know. We haven't, I can't remember looking at the website recently if there's a civic page or our government or either that, or at a very minimum, what I've seen commonly is at least there's a cross linkage to main page. They're often, it's harder sometimes to manage sublinks and stuff, but at least having, I think that's another benefit of a formal agreement. We've formalized a partnership. Until you formalize a partnership, you really run into problems of promoting another nonprofit, and then they say, "What about us? What about us?" And this contract, once it's done, really solidifies that and provides for that exchange to say that, yeah, we have a Coburg Main Street link because they're a formal service provider partner of ours. Whereas another, we might like other nonprofits, but if we don't have formal agreements with them, it's a slippery slope of where do you stop?
Not a Main Street link on the city page, but a city link on the Main Street page.
Right. Yeah, I think both directions, but rather than having it be, at a city administration report level, what I've mostly seen is just, having a chamber or a visitor convention bureau or whatever have a link to the city page overall, to the homepage.
Okay.
And then people can find stuff from there. But I think that cross-pollination is great.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot going on, yes. Okay, it sounds like we're ready to move to the last item here, or second to last item, I should say. So that is the Lane Act, Lane Area Commission on Transportation, um, priority project identification for Coburg. Um,
Yeah, I could cue it up and then turn it over to you. This
Okay.
is really, Counselor Ingebrigtsen's, and Mayor Bell's, topic. Realizing that we're on the clock to kind of, give some guidance, as the, liaison to, Lane Act. There's some decisions or some putting forward of a project. So what I put together is hopefully captures, what, Counselor Ingebrigtsen needs in the way of discussion and direction for her to submit, the city's top priority transportation need. And the challenge is that I think, we don't, it's hard to decipher, and I'll let you, go into it further, what the target is. You know, is it, is it the big regional stuff? Is it, that we've traditionally spoke frequently about and advocated frequently for, that has been well received, I think. I put the list of recommendations here, exit 199, the interchange, two different options for that one. We can talk about the interchange improvements versus the full replacement. The east-west commuter alternative route, which does have a funding for feasibility study in 26, which is, year and a half, away soon. And then, some other one, the two that I added there that we talked about offline was our local transportation safety ad hoc committee recommendations. They are draft only at this point. They're meeting for their final meeting in June, but attached is, what the, committee, has put together. I assembled it for the committee, and they were generally in agreement. We have some fine tuning to do to this list, but it just gives you a sense. And then, kind of an outlier wild card is the Coburg Loop Path connection, that is the kind of final thing, the big project that connects it to the rest of the system. The challenge again, and I'll let the counselor take over from here, is what is this priority targeted for? Is it a big money thing? Is it pedestrian, alternative, transportation focused? It's a little squishy about what it's for. So my thought is having a little bit of a council dialogue about it and kind of endorsing or arming, Counselor Ingebrigtsen with a couple different ways to go, depending upon how the list starts shaking out for the other jurisdictions at the meeting coming up here. I think it has to be submitted by next week. So with that, maybe you can take it from there and figure out what you're really looking for, what you need in terms of not having to be your individual opinion, but more of the council's, preferred top priority to submit to the region. It's by no means meaning that this project makes its way to funding. It makes its way to a list that makes its way to another group that makes its way to the legislature eventually. But it doesn't hurt to be strategic, as we can about it and have it try to match up with what kind of the flavoring is, or where the funds are, what type of funds, are being targeted. And that's kind of the magic in all of this. So my thought is a little bit of a small, medium, large, kind of head nod, of what are the two or three things we want. And then, counselor as our representative can read the room and pick the one that seems the most appropriate.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. Thank you for setting that up. As you might be aware, counselors, I've been attending most of the Lane Act meetings as the council liaison. And in, I don't know, the last few months, we've been informed that the Joint Committee on Transportation from the Oregon State Legislature is wanting to hear from all these regional acts. So throughout the state of Oregon, each part of Oregon is a member of one of these regional act committees. The region that we're in is mostly Lane County, but then also some other areas outside Layton County, out toward the coast, south of Florence, and can't remember the exact boundaries, but at any rate, I think the challenge is that there's not a lot of super clear direction on exactly what they're looking for, other than they would just like to hear from these different regional acts on what the transportation priorities are. I'd be also, as a little bit of an aside, I've also heard that maybe they're interested in hearing some ideas on strategy for how to deal with their budget issues, but I'm just going to set that aside for right now. And our Lane Act committee has decided that they want to focus on presenting transportation priorities to this group. And they were originally scheduled to visit the Lane Act toward the end of June, and now it sounds like that's getting postponed to about the middle of July. But what they've come back and decided to do is that the Lane Act will put forward, I can't remember the exact, they're gonna, somehow we're going to decide as a group on, overall as a region, what is the top 1 or 2 or 3 priorities overall as a region. But the other part of the assignment is that every jurisdiction, the members of the Lane Act are every jurisdiction, like the city, the county has membership, the metropolitan, what is that called? The Metropolitan Planning Committee has a seat at the table. And then there's also, aside from actual jurisdictions, like, government jurisdictions within Lane Act, the other members are at large, and they represent as interests such as pedestrians, such as rail, trucking, and there's a few others like that as well. So anyway, that's what Lane Act is. So anyway, the other part of this is they've asked each member to, especially the jurisdictions, to pick our top priority. And we're going to be allowed to put in a 1-page slide, if you will, into a slide deck, a presentation of what that priority is for Coburg. And so I didn't feel that I should just make a call myself. I really wanted to get at least some kind of feedback from from counselors, or somehow through the community. But there's a really tight deadline here. They want us to respond with this priority by next week, May 17th or May 24th as a drop dead, which is that, yeah. So I think the best we can do is if we can just kind of talk about it a little bit here, if you'll indulge me, at least I can come away with somebody else's opinion besides just mine. So that's going to be, actually Friday is May 17th, or the 24th would be the following Friday. So
Between those Fridays,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So is the east-west commuter alternative route, is that another bridge over the river north of Beltline or whatever? Is that what that is?
Let me go back to this packet. So
Intersection here.
An alternative route for east-west, was that the one that they keep putting in for, but Portland always trumps us because they move more people than we do?
well, as far as what's in our packet here, I obviously the interchange one is fairly self-explanatory, but
Right.
yeah, I've been struggling to come up with a catchphrase to describe the other priority. I'm maybe coalescing around in my mind our Northwest Gateway into Coburg. So it's talking about how, over at the intersection that's next to our fire station and next to the elementary school, our Northwest Gateway into Coburg. The issue there is that bottleneck,
Okay,
and commuter and commercial traffic that are passing through Coburg, that have to come through that's the only intersection they can come through if they're coming from northwest of town.
that's where we drew that. It was in the plan to have that. It wasn't exactly in the correct spot, but that there was a placeholder route for that.
It's that same concept, I
It's
think,
that same-
exact location.
So this
you
isn't
know,
regional, these are strictly Coburg issues.
mm,
I mean, they go to regional, but like
would be
the east
regionally
west
funded.
commuter alternative is just the Coburg impact, or does that take the Harrisburg traffic, and is that the same conversation for the Harrisburg traffic to route it so everything doesn't come through Coburg?
Right.
Okay,
You know,
thanks.
people, I think same thing of trying to figure out what's the shortened
What
version
all
for it.
this-
You know, I've said, when I first got here, I've said, oh, you mean the bypass? And people say, oh, no, it's not a bypass, but I think it is.
Yeah.
Net
But I
route,
think,
bypass.
yeah, the traffic, engineer types don't, for whatever reason, it probably technically isn't a bypass, but that's what it practically kind of the intention is to kind of be able to provide a different way for that quadrant to not have to come through Van Dyne, Willamette, and then either straight or out. It gets them kind of out and around.
So it was kind of up in the lanes turn area that it would cut across.
Yeah,
something.
my understanding of the feasibility study is to kind of figure out from a traffic analysis, what would have the highest trip counts, would actually be the most effective. And so I think locationally, that's a part of that feasibility study is to kind of figure that out. And then,
Just
you know,
lane
later on, I don't know if the feasibility would even get into like right of way acquisition and stuff, but there probably is a little bit of
Right.
environmental, like
Sure.
what obstacles are there, you know, for this route versus this version of the route. But yeah, it's
Okay,
as
so that-
Councilor Engelbrechtsen said, it's really it's local kinda, but it really is taking all the stuff that comes in. It would be near to us physically, but
Mhm.
it's really to address a lot of the stuff that's coming from the north through that is
Okay.
not going 99 yet and is not going I-5 yet.
For the shortcut.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
You said that these are maybe issues close to Coburg, but they are regionally funded, right? Is it likely that you're more likely to get funding if these issues affect this general region as opposed to something that's specific to Coburg?
That's a good question. I don't,
It is a good question. And so here again, this is a bit, less specific and in scope and in direction than most requests like this. It's not like there's a specific grant, that somebody's offering or real specific funding. This is really just for legislators on the Joint Transportation Committee to just get a feel for what their constituents think is important. And there could be, yes, a potential for funding. They have said they want to propose a funding package at the 2025 legislative session. So this will inform
yeah.
what they might fund. And I think it's a perfect question, Counselor Wells. Would we have better luck mentioning a priority that has regional impact, because that might sound more appealing, to a legislator, that it might have a broader reach, or are we better just picking something kind of small and just Coburg to say this is Coburg's priority and not get muddled up in a regional priority? Like, my feeling is, I'll just tell you my personal feeling about putting forward the I-5 interchange issue as Coburg's top priority. My worry about that is I feel that project is truly requires regional partnership as far as funding the infrastructure. And it also obviously has a regional benefit if something were to, if we were to get a giant, semiconductor plant there, it would require regional funding because Coburg certainly can't do it by themselves. And it would be a benefit regionally, but I don't know that, for me, I don't know that we want to make that Coburg's highlighted priority.
One of the things, as you say that, is that interchange, if we do get a large business over there that does need infrastructure changes, once that plan is maybe more in the works and more likely to happen, that gives then, that itself would raise that up as a priority. So I know that, and just in having talked to Ray, because he was on Lane Act and listening to him sometimes when he came home, it seemed like for a while that we were afraid to put big projects on because it was felt that the more populated areas always bumped out a bigger project like the East-West. And I know that there were people that felt that if it isn't on there, if it's on there for long enough, it's going to become a priority, but as soon as you make it a non-priority, it drops all the way back to the bottom again. So I don't know what you found, but my understanding was it was a bit of a dance, and sometimes you lucked out and sometimes you didn't, but often the larger metropolitan areas, because they do more mass transit, they get it for the rail lines, they get it for the electric buses, and then it's kind of fiddle out, so.
I think it's sort of important to think about the audience, you know, and who's this directed to. And because as Counselor said, it's not a direct funding mechanism request, right? It's not the STIP. It's not things that actually put you in a ranked spot for funding. This is more of a strategy and a impactful story to go with a project example, I think. I mean, maybe, you know, that's the hard part because who we're directing this to is layers away from the dollars, but they're helping influence the construction of the funding package. So yeah, I think it's all really, we talked about it and kind of went around almost back to where we started, like, oh, did we make any progress? And I tend to, my staff opinion is that the small stuff from the ad hoc committee could be a very, you know, functional story, but it's tiny dollars. And it doesn't have that regional impact. The two that I think make the most sense, and I think I've said it in the council meeting before, is the big ask for the, you know, bullet number one, the replacement. That's a $40 million project. That's 10 years out if we started now. If ODOT started now, it's a 10-year out project. With all of the engineering design, environmental review, right-of-way acquisition, construction, you know, bidding, all that stuff, it's 10 years. And it won't start now. So it's more than 10 years away. And as you said, the development over there, regional jobs, regional benefit is going to be the thing that drives that funding mechanism. And I think the prior advocacy that this council and staff have done, you know, before I got here and a little since then has been very effective. That message is loud and clear. That thing is number 2 to Beltway. It's just really, or Beltline, excuse me. It's just really expensive. And until the employment stuff comes closer, it doesn't solve enough. Right. It matters. It's structurally sound, but it's weird turning radiuses. Everybody bangs it all the time. The semis bang it all the time, and it's bad for pedestrians and bikes. But it's not enough accumulatively to move the needle. It will. The piece that I added is the subset of that, which is the trip cap that is going to short circuit the development quicker, is can be alleviated by signalization at the southbound direction. That's a $2 to $4 million project instead of a $40 million project. Could be done in a period of 3 to 5 years, would sort of match the development trajectory of the parcel. That and it's still regional. It has the economic development jobs piece to it from a story for legislators. It's got some pedestrian bicycle improvements, marginal, and it's a step towards, you know, that they would do it in a way that doesn't waste the money when a full thing needs to happen. So it's a progressive step towards it. That to me seems pretty viable with this particular audience to sell. The other one that I think Councilor Engelbrechtsen mentioned is there a way to emphasize and put extra weight on something that already has some funding for the feasibility study, that bypass? That one I think is a really good story. It has much more local traffic benefit to it in terms of removal of trip counts from our downtown core, where we can do a lot more pedestrian stuff. Our tourism, our events are really growing a pedestrian downtown that proven to be more thriving when it's at scale. And positively impacting, I would assume, you know, Rexius and the ag businesses out here would like it as well. So it has multiple angles of positive project to a regional, local combo. So I think that one's really good. And the Coburg Loop Path, you know, the connection, if it is, you know, it's back pocket one. If, you know, if we're at the meeting and go, oh, this is a PED, you know, bike and PED alternative funding package. Well, then if that's the case, and that's the only one that has enough zeros on it to kind of make the cut of this conversation, could be a great one. Interconnectivity of bike transportation gets a lot of play. And it scores really well, and we do have it's in our master plan, so it's not out of thin air. So I think that one is like a back pocket. If the angle is alternative transportation, that's a good one for us. But to me, the two that probably kind of rise to the top are the east-west commuter and trying to make sure we say that, yeah, it's got feasibility money already attached to it, but we need more than that. We need it to happen. You know, we need it to not just be feasibility. And if there's a way to leverage that.
I think too, that one has, I know, been on the list for a long time. And the east-west.
Commitment to this.
Yeah.
It's known. I mean, because it
Yeah.
has that funding, it did make the funding
Right.
package to get that feasibility, which is usually, that's the first, you know, that's the first thing that gets assigned to a project is do a feasibility study. But what if the feasibility study happens and it just sits there with no momentum to it? You know, I think that was one of your points, and I think that's a good point. I don't know how quite to say it and package it. To say, because I wouldn't want to say, well, you already got the feasibility. What are you barking about? You already have a feasibility study funding. So to say it in a way that is compelling to say that that's a big need for the region, and it positively impacts the community.
And I think with that one, if the pressure is kept on long enough, hopefully it will float to the top, and it is a large amount of money. But if you don't ask, you don't get. And if we drop it as a priority, that would be my concern. So.
Yeah, and I don't know
have
if
this
not.
much knowledge about that.
Yeah.
I think the loop path is maybe something, if they have a few grand left over, they don't know what to do with it. It's like, oh, we'll do that one. But
That
I
loop
don't
path
think
is-
the loop path would
It's $1 million.
supersede the interchange.
I agree, but well, it's $1 million or $2 million, that loop path. It's
Yeah.
not, I mean, it's chump change to big stuff.
Right.
To
To this group, it's chump change
Right.
when you look at what
Yeah.
other regions put forward.
But it's a very highly sought after bicycle infrastructure project that connects two communities. And has some recreational, you know, cycling as an industry and a tourism connection. There's a lot of play that you could do behind, you know, to increase that. But yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know if we may also be overthinking it for this
Sounds like
particular
a
thing.
roll of the
Yeah.
dice, you keep it
Yeah.
on there, you keep griping about it, and sooner or later, maybe the dice roll in your favor. If it's not there, they're not going to. I don't know what you think, but would putting the east-west alternative route, it may negate getting anything, but not having it on there, we still might not get anything.
You have to remember,
It
this isn't a
just takes-
specific ask, though. This is
Right.
a development of you know, steps
priority
towards
list.
development of an ultimate package that goes through the legislature.
And just to clarify that, you know, we're not taking anything off our list.
Right.
Mhm.
They're just asking
It's
for
just
us
a
to put
priority.
one page together with our Coburg's priority for Coburg.
For this particular conversation and
So,
group.
yeah,
yeah.
for this particular, you know, visit by the Joint Committee on Transportation.
Will Mayor Bell be back in time for you to be able to ask
She's
her what she,
been in the
Yeah.
loop.
she's been on that committee for quite
Yeah,
a
she's back
while.
Friday, or, yeah, I have a
Okay.
meeting with her Friday.
Yeah, so
I
she
trust
could
you.
weigh in then. Yeah, yeah. And she
I would
has
love
been
to
in the
see
loop.
the
on the question.
bypass. I don't know what the chances are of getting it, but you know the group better, so.
I don't know. I'm leaning toward highlighting whatever, we got to come up with a better name, but an alternate route
Mhm.
for regional, commercial and commuter traffic through Coburg's Northwest Gateway.
I think that's excellent.
And it's.
Yeah, I
it's
think
a
that's excellent.
multi-county.
Right.
Region.
That actually,
And then like.
It's Lynn and Lane.
yeah. No, I think you captured that one great.
Good job, man.
That one.
Action City, Monroe, all of that.
Yeah,
How do you boil it down into what
Uh-huh.
word?
That was pretty good.
Northwest Gateway? I don't know.
Yeah.
Alternate route? I don't know.
it kind of goes along with what's happening with the interchange conversation in the last two meetings I've been in with Regional Solutions, Commissioner Buck, from Lane County, Vidal, the main, ODOT person, and the messaging that we're doing, it's rebranding. One of the steps towards getting that interchange done is to not call it the Coburg exit. It's the North County, interchange, or the, North Lane interchange or something, the team is working on landing on the language for it. So we always use that same language and not make it Coburg to really make sure that it isn't a Coburg project.
Right.
It's a very much a long-term regional project. It extends what happened at the big stuff there at
Mhm.
Beltline. It's a similar thing for a capacity building project that's inevitable. But calling it the Coburg interchange, I think everybody has recognized, for people not right here in the room and in the valley, it doesn't resonate as well. It doesn't make as much sense to, like you were talking about with the two counties. And the other thing, they have to know intuitively that it's serving a bigger purpose than just a community.
Counselor Wells, did you have a?
No, I
something?
think
Okay.
those three, we don't have to we don't have to label them priority 1, 2, 3, right? You just have to bullet point 3, or you do.
Just one.
In this
Oh, just
particular, just for
one.
this
we
particular
have to pick
exercise where they're going on what they're calling it, at one point I heard it called a listening tour, the Joint Committee on Transportation, going around the state doing a listening tour. And the steering committee of Lane Act has decided the way Lane Act is going to present is that each jurisdiction gets to highlight their top priority. The region, they will also speak on behalf of our region and probably pick the Beltline project or something of that nature as the region's top priority. But then as a way to let us, especially the smaller jurisdictions, have something to say, they're going to allow all of us to put one priority on a slide, more or less. And so I didn't want to make that decision by myself. I wanted to have some conversation and.
You sound like you're right.
Not that we can't get the other counselors' input, but I think the east-west, what did you call it? The
Northwest Gateway.
Yeah, I like
Alternate
that.
route.
I think it hits the mix to me. When you brought that up, I think it's the best of what we have out there, of hitting the mix of local and regional, and letting them know that, that this quadrant needs traffic addressed. And it has the benefit of doing some economic benefit for our downtown. And, there's lots of subset, ripple effect benefits of it.
Would it be helpful to have a picture of what happens in Coburg when they close I-5? I mean, traffic was backed up for
Oh, it's
over
Couldn't
2.5
get it.
hours.
It was, one lady was going from Armitage to Powerline and it took her 2.5 hours to get home. So maybe a visual of this may not seem like a big deal, but I-5 incidents are happening more frequently. And this is what our town looks like when that happens, because there is nowhere else to go.
Another way to get.
Right.
Yeah, they do ask for some sort of a map and a visual. I'm not sure if we can cram all that whole concept in, but to one page, but I mean, that's a very good point. And the other thing I would say in advocating for drawing their attention to the Northwest Gateway, Coburg is, yes, it is a regional issue, but Coburg has to carry the water to the well on that. We have to be the ones that bring it up because it impacts Coburg substantially. So
more than
we have to
anyone
be the
else.
cheerleaders for it. Nobody else is probably going to.
It's ultimately a
Um,
Lane County project, but you're right. It's not going to be Lane County's number one priority on their list, necessarily. I don't think they're opposed to it, but it's, you look at their boundaries and that's not, it's without advocating for it and kind of keeping it on the radar. I think it would be challenging. I think they would be looking for external funding as well. They would not be looking at that as part of their own CIP at all. So yeah, I think for that reason too, that it's and the other part that, you know, we can't get too many, all these bullet points in there, but you know, that is our likely residential growth area as well. So, you know, we'll that's beneficial to this housing production policies and infrastructure funding as well, because that's in every single piece of infrastructure funding that's out there right now, it is tied by kind of executive order and mandate to housing production. Those are the ones that get prioritized.
Well, I mean, on that's a very good point. I mean,
It
we
is.
can't expand the community without solving that particular transportation
It'd be
issue.
yeah, it'd be challenging to do it without that. And of course, we don't want to have it go where then it allows unlimited, you know, where we don't have
No.
any gatekeeping, but we wouldn't. But no, it is a part of that, and how the feasibility study, you know, we'll want to have our fingers, you know, and our eyes and ears as close to that as we can, because it will have an impact on how our urban growth boundary conversations go, because it's a key piece of infrastructure that that we want ultimately to have it be compatibly designed too.
Maybe that should be included in how that's presented, that it is impacting our ability to grow. Provide what is the buildable lands inventory that's required by the OLC's, not the DSL, I guess, is that the
LCD.
LCD?
Yep.
Do they put any weight on emergency services? I don't know if Chief Larson has got any documentation for the time spent during an I-5 shutdown in either lane, or, you know, north or southbound, or even just Harrisburg residents that are saying, hey, you know, we need to do something.
Again, we're really early in this is conceptual. So when you start actually vying for a slot on the STIP, that's when
you
those kind
do
of
that.
things come
Okay.
through. We're multiple steps away from that level of detail, but that, you know, that stuff does ultimately come into play and help scores projects, but we're not at all
This is
submitting this as
just-
a scoring kind of a conversation yet. I think it's trying to say what's compelling. And I think what's really cool about everything that I've seen from the Coburg side is smartly talking and advocating for things that benefit Coburg, but that also clearly are a regional improvement as well. Because if you're, and some cities do this, they vie for only their things, right? And over time they go, well, they always are just looking out for their stuff. You know, you really do need to have them look, our stuff should look at the big picture, and this really does. So I think you're right. I think it is probably the most viable one for this particular audience, this particular process. And then, and as Counselor said, it's not like these are we're not removing anything. We continue to work on, we have to continue to work on the interchange for the economic development part.
Mhm.
We'll continue to work on our local stuff. We'll scrap and claw for, you know, for whatever funds we can and whatever approvals we need to get for all of this stuff. This is just a pathway through our membership and participation in Lane Act through the legislative formulation of a package of funds.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your input on that. I definitely appreciate allowing me to bounce some ideas around here
That's a
on that.
Good one.
very time consuming committee, so thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Tell you, the other counselors missed out. This has been some good conversation
Oh,
tonight. They missed out.
Okay, well, thank you so much also to Adam for helping me work through that with you all. Okay, so then would there be any counselor comments that you would like to make or liaison updates?
The Parks Committee is continuing to do work parties. They have also, they've not made any recommendations as yet, but they're looking at how to alleviate some of the man hours that are going into maintaining parks with weeding and stuff, and also looking at how we can maybe work toward
getting sponsors or donations or whatever to offset some of what people would like to see done. I don't know that there's anything specific, but very, very mindful of where we are in the budget and what the man hours look like. So those discussions are happening. I expect there may be some recommendations coming forward. Council in the future regarding those. That was about it.
Thank you, Counselor Smith. Well, let's see here. Anything else from staff?
I don't think so. We covered a bunch of ground. I really appreciate all the feedback and discussion that every time we do it, I think we get a little bit better understanding of things and direction we need to go. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, very well. Well, thank you, everybody, for your participation tonight, and I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 10 minutes.